Greetings, YouTube. Recently, I was driving through Bedford, New Hampshire, and there was a yard sale. So I pulled off to the side of the road, 100 feet or so past the yard sale itself on the other side of the road, and got out and crossed the street. And while I was walking through the grass towards the yard sale, I found this. It's a perfectly ordinary, everyday stainless steel spoon. Um, I picked it up off the ground. It was in fine condition. There was a little bit of residue in the bottom of the bowl itself, which made me think it had been lying out there long enough to have lived through at least one storm, maybe more, because water had pooled in it and dried. So I picked it up, put it in my pocket, went to the yard sale. I didn't find anything I wanted to buy that day. Then I get home, and it was on my way home from a day of bargain hunting, and this was essentially the last thing I picked up. Literally picked it off the ground. So it got me wondering, how did this spoon, perfectly good, perfectly acceptable spoon made by the Daily Chef, made in China, how did it end up alongside the road in Bedford, New Hampshire? What is the story behind this spoon? Now, I'm not actually talking about the story of the spoon, though if someone would like to write a story about the spoon, feel free. What I'm talking about here is the details that we can use to launch a character concept or an adventure idea. And they can become, they can come out of anywhere, and they can start very, very small. We can build a story or a character around this spoon. Yes, I know that sounds absurd, but how the spoon got there, who owned the spoon before, why did it get lost, how did it get lost. These little details can give you an in from a different angle on a story or on a character. And it's this kind of ground up approach, if you will, in this case literally ground up, seeing as I found it lying on the ground, that I kind of enjoy thinking about. I'll start with a character class. I'll be honest, a lot of time I come up, okay, it'd be kind of cool to play X. And then I begin to think about, okay, what does this class do? Why does this class have these abilities? How do these classes' abilities, how are they derived? Where are their source? Who would acquire them? How did they acquire them? And then that begins the process of me figuring out how the character I'm playing with in my head, the idea, and I do this all the time while I'm at work. I come up with characters in my head, which I never use, I never write down, I just invent them, just for fun. How they come about. For example, the Warlock. The D&D Warlock, not the term used as a derogatory comment in the past, or as a term used from Harry Potter, but the class from 3.5, the Warlock. Basically a more raw version of the sorcerer. I've actually heard people say that the Warlock should have been the sorcerer, themed specific types like that, less general as the sorcerer had become. Though the sorcerers have themes as well. In Pathfinder, they have bloodlines and things like that that really are quite appropriate, and very well detailed. And so I took the idea. I want to play a sorcerer. Okay, well, what do you got? You got it's got a vaguely demonic vibe. I'm not necessarily something that I 100% agree with, but it's got a vaguely demonic vibe to it. So, regardless of the alignment of the character, there's probably going to have been some kind of connection in the past with some devil or demon from somewhere, or otherworldly creature that has entered the bloodline of a family. Probably through sex, and since I'm a nice guy, it's going to be consensual. And I thought, okay, consensual sex with an underworldly being, we'll say, could be something, could be a tight tiefling. A tiefling would be a good source, a full-blood tiefling, which is themselves kind of one step removed from demon. So, you get a little distance there, so you're not doing the whole summoning pack thing. And I thought, okay, someone had sex with a tiefling, and what's the kind of family would really not want anyone to know that one of their bloodline had sex with a tiefling? Wealth, power. So now I've got a family, powerful, wealthy family, someone from the family, because the tiefling doesn't have much play at all in the family. We're going to assume that the person having the sex was a woman, because that can be fire and forget for the tiefling at least. So the tiefling gets involved, whirlwind romance, moves on. The woman has no regrets, but gives birth to a half tiefling. And the half tiefling goes on to have some kind of great adventure, but they leave that touch in the family line. And a spark of the rebellious, which again isn't really greatly appreciated in a family of wealth and power, who tend to be somewhat staid and conservative. And so along comes the grandchild. Now, people have passed off the whole their parent being a little on the wild side as, that's just their thing. The grandmother successfully hid the fact that she'd had a relationship with the tiefling, say she'd gotten married during the pregnancy, so there's almost nobody knows that this is not a regular quote unquote kid, okay? That this has some kind of a bloodline other than human. And kid, I would be playing a male, it's my thing. Hits teen years, powers manifest. I usually tend these kind of powers like sorcerers and warlocks, they manifest in the teen years, and suddenly the teen has the ability to cast magic, or at least a fire and an eldritch blast, and is suddenly incredibly personable because they took the eligibility of improving their charisma and their general diplomatic and intimidation skills. So this starts the person down a path where they can get through life with a literal smile and a wink, and it's a bit of a threat. So they aren't taking seriously their lessons. You're going to be the scion of a family line, so you have to take your responsibility to the family well. Things become contentious, and eventually the character leaves the family because he knows that this is going nowhere. They don't want me here. I don't want to be here. They're not happy with the fact that I have this weird ability and that I'm not paying attention to the family business, whatever it is. Could be minor nobility, could be merchant house. So the person leaves, keeps their first name because they like the first name, but changes their last name to something else, some kind of moniker. Pablo Blackhand is what I came up with because I figured that there would be a physical manifestation like sorcerers have. I've always played that sorcerers always have some physical manifestation of their power. Well, I play warlocks the same way, so there's a physical manifestation. In this case, the skin on his forearms begins to darken at the elbows till it gets to his hands, and both of his hands are black, even though he is fairly olive-skinned in tone. Mediterranean kind of thing going on there. So he's Pablo Blackhand, and he goes out in the world, and he is self-centered. He's chaotic neutral. He pretty much cares about getting his jollies in life and not much else. He is capable of forming friendships, which he does with hopefully at least one member of the party, because that gives him a connection to the group. And initially, at least, he considers himself a hired gun. He joins a group specifically that's looking for an archer. Well, what better than someone that can do the same thing an archer does, but needs no weapon? At least that's the sales pitch he got, and with a good diplomacy skill, the best he can have, plus his bonus because of his eldritch ability, in his invocation, I could say. He sells them on it, and he works his way into the party, and he becomes a valued member until push comes to shove at some later point, and they realize that he is just a mercenary, which is now where we have to pull in has he made an emotional connection and a friendship with someone in the group who could then use that to pull him in to a storyline or storylines that are beyond just making a buck. Kind of playing this off a whole Han Solo. He's just a mercenary. Eventually he gets to become involved in the group. And he may never change from chaotic neutral, but his connection and his continued connection with the party could eventually have him doing things which are well within line with a good aligned party, because he likes the people, he loves the people in his group, at least one of them or more of them. So all of that came from my initial idea. Well, what if you want to play a warlock? And I've actually built up some scenes in my head from how Pablo would introduce himself to the party, things like that, and potential strife scenes where he's like, I'm just a mercenary, I'm just in this a buck. How are you going to sell me on this? Okay? And I would play him partly against type, being in the sense that not only when I'm not chaotic neutral, but I also be playing him as a bisexual character, which is unfortunately in fiction, and this is what we're discussing here. It's unusual for men to be bisexual characters. They're usually considered the unicorns of the universe are usually considered women. But all that came from the kernel was, what if you want to play a warlock? And by that same token, what is the story of the spoon?